Welcome to The Big Rich Show. This podcast will focus on conversations with friends and acquaintances within the four-wheel drive industry. Many of the people that I will be interviewing, you may know the name, you may know some of the history, but let's get in depth with these people and find out what truly makes them a four-wheel drive enthusiast. So now's the time to sit back, grab a cold one, and enjoy our conversation.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Why should you read 4Low Magazine? Because 4Low Magazine is about your lifestyle, the four-wheel drive adventure lifestyle that we all enjoy. Rock crawling, trail riding, event coverage, vehicle builds, and do-it-yourself tech, all in a beautifully presented package. You won't find 4Low on the newsstand rack, so subscribe today and have it delivered to you. On today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, we have Milt Thompson from Dixie Four-Wheel Drive in St. George, Utah and Moab, Utah. So Milt and I have known each other since the mid-90s when I was living in Cedar City. And of course, Milt was down in St. George with Dixie and part of the four-wheel drive club down there. He's opened a lot of trails, if not most of the trails in Sand Hollow. And we'll discuss life off-road and four-wheel drive and Milt's history. Okay, Milt, go ahead and let's get started. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in St. George, born and raised. Back when St. George was around 5,000 people, as I recall. It kind of about the size of Moab now. Little out-of-the-way town. Interstate didn't go through there then. It was hotter than hell there. Still is. It depends on the time of year. But, yeah, growing up as a kid there, very small town, knew most everybody. Lots of places to chase and play down there as a kid growing up.
So how did your life off-road get started?
I don't know if there's one thing I can identify as starting it. I remember as a very young kid, my dad had an old Jeep, an old flat fender, with a 3-speed column shift. And I remember going for a ride with my older brother years ago, and down where Dixie State University is now. We got down that way. Unfortunately, we had to walk home. The old Jeep wasn't in great shape and hadn't been kept up and quit, and we had to walk back, and they had to go get something and tow it back. But that was my earliest recollection of a Jeep ride. A few years later, Dad had quite a collection of odds and ends up in the backyard at our house where we lived. I remember toting the wagon up. It was when I got big enough to lift his toolbox in the wagon and pull it up the hill to the backyard and started working on things. I'd take them apart, see how they worked. My younger brother was prone to breaking the lights and the windows out of things, but I took to liking to working on them. I think the first rig we had a 53 Ford pickup that I remember we got running as kids, about 10 years old, somewhere in there. And so whenever the folks would leave, we would go start it and drive it around up in the backyard and through the neighborhood on the dirt roads.
So it sounds to me like they didn't know that you had it running?
Well, we didn't think they knew we had it running, but the big figure eights out in the open field probably gave them a pretty good clue that something was up. But and then we took a 46 Studebaker half-ton pickup. Was the first rig that I built for off-road to speak of. And I look back now and would like to shoot myself because we cut that truck up. Stripped the body, welded brackets to it. Was where I learned to weld, was on that old project with an old Westinghouse buzz box. We cut it up, shortened the frame. I think it was 5 feet axle center to axle center, and welded a frame on it and had an old fiberglass chair that we bolted to that. Was the only seat on it. And we'd take that out in the yamps and the boonies and run it until we'd get it stuck someplace that we couldn't get it out, and we'd have to have Dad bring a truck out and pull us loose. Back in the day, our house was about the last house in town, and I-15 didn't exist there on the eastern part of St. George. And so from our house clear out to that Black Mesa was nothing but open ground and some dirt roads. So that's where we started wheeling in the beginning, was out in that area.
So you've seen a big change in St. George. I always call it Utah's Orange County, with everybody that's moving in there and all the businesses. And I mean, it's just like going and being down in Orange County, California, to me, but it's just a lot smaller.
Yeah, it's grown immensely. Growing up as a kid, when we'd hike up on the Red Hill, what we called the Red Hill north of town. And there's the fishing pond up there now, but that was a swimming hole, irrigation pond up there. And we knew where all the shade was, and they had dirt ditches along the street, so we'd go up without our shoes, wade in the ditches, and then stand in the shade. And if we had to wait for more than 2 vehicles on the boulevard to get across, it was a traffic jam. We'd shoot by the old Desert Kitchen Cafe and then walk the pipeline up the hill, because the pipeline was cool, had water running through it. And we'd go up on the hill and go swimming or fishing or whatever we wanted to do that day. But that's what we'd do for fun up there. And like I say, it was a very small town at the time. And it was a lot of fun as a kid growing up. Got a lot of fond memories from it. Now, when I'm home in the St. George shop, I try to travel home at off times during the day, and I always go to a stoplight to cross the boulevard because the traffic is insane. And I'm not sure what the current population is. I know it's over 100,000 now and growing rapidly. It seems like every time there's a major natural disaster in California, major earthquake, we get a lot of influx of people moving into southern Utah, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's good for business, crowds things up, but we've met some great people that have moved up. And on the flip side, we've met some that we wish would go back.
Yeah, there's a lot of my friends have moved into the area, off-road community, and I think a lot of that had to do with Lance Clifford, the old Pirate 4x4 originator. When he was a real estate agent, and he moved there.
Moved over to Hurricane, I believe.
Yeah, Hurricane, and then he's been selling houses to everybody that he knows.
Yeah.
I mean, my son's over there now, and Larry McRae, and Ryan, and all sorts of those. Oh, everybody. I mean, even Dave Wong, one of our competitors, has just moved over there. And Sand Hollow, I can remember all of us going out to Sand Hollow, you down in St. George, and then me with Color Country up in Cedar City. And we went there for the sand dunes.
Yeah.
Because we had 3 peaks to play with and up in Cedar, so we didn't even think about rock crawling there. And the sand dunes in Hurricane were a lot closer than Coral Pink.
Yeah.
And those were my early memories, was that area and going in there. But I can remember going on a couple of runs with you where you took us on some of the trails out there. And it wasn't, I don't think, so much in the rocks, but more in like the Arizona Strip, but maybe more of the Utah part of that. There was a couple of pretty good climbs that we went on. I don't even remember all of them. It was so long ago. That was enjoyable. But to get back to what we were talking about, your youth and growing up, what was the first car that you drove that you say as a licensed driver that you were able to commandeer?
I think the first car that I had that was, I would consider mine, I had bought a 1950 Chevy 2-door hardtop deluxe for $25.
Wow.
It was sitting off of 4th East by the old Moss home, and I can't even remember who owned it at the time. I bought it from somebody and bought it cheap because it didn't run. Went through the 216 motor it had in it, the old splash crank, and fixed it up, and that was my first car that that I owned and drove. I had it up until the time just before I got married. I actually sold that car to buy my wife's diamond ring. I think I sold it for $400 when I did.
Oh, nice markup.
Well, unfortunately, a friend of mine is a car collector in St. George, showed up at the shop one day driving a 1950 deluxe hardtop. He had just bought at the Scottsdale auction. And I says, Dennis, where did you get that? And he says, you know what this is? And I said, yeah, I used to own one. He says, I stole this thing. He says, I only gave $19,000 for it. I about died. I had put a 283 V8 in mine with a 3-speed with an overdrive on it. And I drove that all through high school. But, you know, that old car on the highway, of course, octane and fuel was a lot better then. At 75 mile an hour on the freeway, I got 30 miles a gallon in that car.
Wow.
It was a great little car. And my wife oftentimes says, you know, wish you'd kept that car. She, over the years we've been married, she lost that ring somehow, and we got her another one. But so that was the first car that I actually owned. That I did have a dune buggy I had built out of the leftovers of a 64 Volkswagen bus that all my sisters had learned to drive, and each one of them had at least one turn wrecking it. So it was pretty hammered by the time I got my hands on it. And we took the front axle out of it, the transaxle out of the back, and I made a chassis out of galvanized pipe. Not the best thing to learn.
Welding that galvanized?
To weld on. You want to do that out where it's windy and it blows that away, because it'd make you pretty sick sometimes. Welded that old dune buggy up, and we run that all through high school too. It was... that's where we started running out to Hurricane Sand Dunes, is what we called it then.
Yeah. Back
in, I want to say 72, when I first started driving out there with the buggy. And we had a lot of fun, got a lot of places with it, but nothing like what you can do with a Jeep now. Right.
Talk about your family a little bit, if you don't mind.
Well, my family, if you go back to my great-grandfathers, were sent to St. George by Brigham Young to settle.
Wow.
And they got there and either just never left or couldn't get out or something, hard to say. They were sent down with the original group of settlers that Brigham Young sent down. My dad's side and my dad's mother, her grandfather was James G. Blake, who was a secretary to Brigham Young. And he was sent down with that original group as well.
Wow.
And then just recently, we've checked some history on my mother's side. My great-grandfather on my mother's side was originally from Pennsylvania, who got to Utah on his way to the California Gold Rush. And they stopped in Ogden to fix wagons and get stocked up in one thing or another. And during the months they were there, he kind of fell for this young lady in Ogden. And they started out for California and decided, you know, the gold's not worth it. He went back and got married and lived up in the Farmington area, is what is Farmington, Utah now.
Right.
And in reading their history, he had a big, really nice piece of property. It turned out it's the same property that Lagoon is built on now.
The Lagoon Water Park, right.
But he was called to the Southern Mission by the church leaders and went down and settled in Harrisburg, which was a rough life for him.
I would imagine.
And so when it started finally getting up and going in Harrisburg, he got called by President Taylor at the time as part of the group that went down through Hole in the Rock, traveled through Hole in the Rock down to Bluff, Utah, and settled there for a period of time, and eventually moved down into Arizona, Alpine, and then years later ended up back in Paragouna, Utah, where he eventually passed away.
Okay. So he made a lot of travel then.
Yeah, he traveled a bunch.
And that wasn't easy travel back then.
No. If you get on YouTube and look at the Impossible Journey 1 about Hole in the Rock, I think Bleep and Jeep did a 3-part video of Hole in the Rock, and gives a lot of history. And watching the two of those together, one after the other, gives you a pretty good respect for what those poor pioneers went through, going through that travel.
I'm always amazed at when we I travel the country a lot, putting on events, all back and forth across the country. And I see all these beautiful roads that we drive on now, and we complain about potholes and irregular road surfaces.
Yeah.
And then you look at some of the trails that the pioneers came across on. You can still see the wagon tracks in a lot of different places. Mm-hmm. One of them up in Idaho, where I lived for a while. It's amazing what they did and how they did it, and that the fortitude that they had. Much more than what we have now. We are so spoiled.
Oh yeah.
With technology, and technology is advancing, of course, and all the youngest generations even have more of it. They just don't build like they used to. Yeah.
I tell my kids that you think you got it tough, you look back and read what some of your ancestors went through. They were stout, hardy people.
Absolutely.
And my grandfather on my mother's side, who was his father that went down through Hole in the Rock, and my grandfather was born in Alpine, Arizona in 1884. He was a blacksmith. As the wagon started to fade and the cars came in, he became a mechanic. And so I look back on some of my ancestry, and it helps me understand kind of where I've come from and what's led me to some of the things I do.
He was able to what we call pivot now.
Yeah.
Which is really important, especially through this COVID thing.
Oh, yeah.
We had to pivot a lot with our business. And I know a lot of other people with businesses, especially in entertainment, where we found out we were essentially non-essential. Mm-hmm. And it was like, okay, now what are we going to do? Instead of sitting for so long. How was your business during the COVID?
We come over here in February of this year. And mostly my youngest son, they were having a baby, and he needed to go home to St. George, where her doctor was. And so we come over so they could go home, but that was just prior to COVID hitting. And so when the COVID thing hit, nobody knew what was really going to happen, and it made it sound like, 2 out of every 10 were going to die. And so we said, you know what, you guys go home, stay in my house, because nobody's been in it for a week or two. We know what's good. You guys stay there, and we'll stay here and run this till things get sorted out. And we're still here.
They're still in your house.
Yeah, and they're still in my house there, which is all right. I mean, it's been good here. But during the whole COVID thing, we were classified as an essential business because we're automotive repair. And I've been busy. I've worked every single day. We haven't missed a day's work through the entire thing. And I've had some days that I've had to work out to other shops and recommend other places they take them, because I wasn't able to physically get them in because I was backed up.
Yeah, and right now I notice you have no staff. It's just you and your wife.
Yeah, we've had employees in the past here. It's been difficult, especially the unemployment benefits that they're paying all this extra money.
Nobody wants to work.
People aren't willing to work.
No, they can sit at home and make money.
We've put out a couple of shots for employees, and in a 6-month period of time, we've had one response.
Wow.
They weren't somebody I could hire, but only one response. And so it would be nice to have somebody that was passionate about the sport of off-roading and with some background in that. But Moab is quite an expensive place to live. A little bit difficult that way, but I would love to eventually find somebody that we could train in to either manage and run the shop, get some employees here, make it solid, and make that work. But like I say, as far as the COVID goes, we've stayed, in fact, both shops. Our St. George stop, I talked to them this morning. They scheduled 16 new jobs today.
Wow.
A lot of people that are penned up has enough. I got to get out. I'm going to go do something. Wheeling, off-roading, and that has been a really popular thing, and gotten more so with people being cooped up. They want to get out.
Yeah, I noticed that when we got back to an event schedule, all of our events have been better than previous years, especially on the West Coast. or what we call our Western series. And I really think it's because people have been, cooped up and they just want to get out and do something. And even though we have COVID protocols and we recommend everybody wear masks, we don't require it. We don't say you have to. If you don't wear a mask, you got to leave. We have extra hand wash stations and things like that. But the other thing is we don't allow anybody to shame each other because they're either wearing a mask or not wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things I see really bad right now going on.
You got to have respect for other people.
Correct. There's a big lack of respect in the United States right now,
Yeah.
Unfortunately. That's true. So how did the process go from high school building cars? Did you get into, when did off-road become kind of a mainstay of your life?
That probably didn't happen until, as far as a mainstay, until probably the later 80s. After high school, I did work for a garage downtown full-time as mechanic up until the time I left and served a mission for the church. And that was interesting because I even fixed some cars while I was down in Florida.
Oh, is that where you said?
I served in the Florida Fort Lauderdale mission years ago, back in 76 and 7. And then when I come home, I went to work for Tunex, doing their carburetors and tuning and stuff. Worked for them for a period of time until that we could see the writing on the wall. The guy that owned the company wasn't paying his franchise. And we knew that wasn't going to last long. And so I'd worked for another gas station, different things, and ended up as a warehouse operator for more business forms for most of a year. And that occasionally would get me into trouble because when I get done with all my jobs in the warehouse and I had free time, you had to do something to stay busy. And I had a bad habit of working on my own equipment that was supposed to go to the maintenance department. And every now and again, they'd catch me working on the forklifts and say, "That's not your job." But, maintenance had a work order for 2 weeks and hadn't done anything.
Of course.
And so I finally moved on from there. My wife had a real hankering to move back up by her folks. She was from Riverton, Utah. Begrudgingly, I gave in. And we moved to Riverton, and right at the time of which was the recession of 1980, went through 5 jobs in 8 months. Would get a job, go to work for a couple of weeks, show up in the morning, and the big sign on the door saying closed.
Wow.
Went through a number of jobs that way, did a little bit of everything, and last job up there was working for an excavating company. Worked for them. I'd been with them for a couple of months and was running a crew, digging mainline water and sewer and putting stuff together for them. And then when the weather was bad or couldn't work, they'd have me work on their equipment, which wouldn't have been too bad other than it was in the garage at his house on a gravel floor, which was not the best of conditions, but,
It was still work.
It was work. Did what we could do. I was working then for $5 an hour. And we were about starved to death. And I recall it being like February, and my wife rolled over and said, I think we should go back to St. George. And I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning and started packing.
You were ready.
And we moved back to St. George, went into business for myself at the time. I was actually in the custom woodworking business. I had bought some equipment and was making payments on it, and we went into the custom woodworking and furniture restoration.
Wow.
Did a lot of antique restoration work, and we did that for 14 years.
That's why you're so good at detail then.
I think part of that's where that come from is fussy and figuring out how to make things work, how to make things fit, because a lot of times that old stuff, was missing pieces or broke up, and you have to figure out what. And I think the oldest piece we ever did was a spinning wheel from the 16th century for an attorney that had a really old European spinning wheel. And we actually had to hand forge some of the metal parts, which having had a grandfather that was a blacksmith come in handy because I'd learned a little bit from him.
That's awesome. I love blacksmithing. A couple of years ago, I took a a folk school class for a week doing blacksmithing. Mm-hmm. And even though it was a basic introductory blacksmithing, eventually when we settle down and I retire and find a place to live, I'm going to create a shop. And one of the things I'm going to do is get a forge and an anvil and bunch of metal and start beating on things.
Yeah, it can be a lot of fun, and so take your frustration out on something rather than yelling at somebody. Yeah, I do have some of my grandfather's, a few of his old tools that I still have to this day, and actually still use some of them I have in my toolbox out here.
Well, that's awesome.
But so we spent, like I say, about 14 years, and the entire time of being in the furniture business, I was doing automotive on the side to supplement the furniture business, because it wasn't a real lucrative business at the time. I didn't have really any competition in it. We'd do things like we'd weave the cane seats in the chairs, hand weave them.
Wow.
The rawhide seats, the old Pioneer stuff. So I got a chance to learn a lot of things. We did which is not politically correct anymore, we restored the Civil War cannon that the college had.
Okay.
The Dixie Rebels, that they used to pull it in the parades, and cannon and the case on and all that. That I went through and made some of the new spokes in it, restored the wagon wheels so they could pull it in the parades and do everything. And then when we get done with it, ever after, they just pull it on a wagon, and then somehow it mysteriously got damaged and disappeared from the college.
How long ago did that happen?
Oh, it's been a few years back.
Okay.
It was a little suspicious of how it went. Somebody said somebody had put something in it and blown the barrel up. Well, I can guarantee that didn't happen, because why, we had that cannon, we shot that cannon. And when you shoot one of those off with a 1/4 pound of powder in it at midnight in the middle of town,
you wake some people
it
up.
Excites people. It's a good thing we didn't get caught. We'd probably gone to jail. So, yeah, during the whole interim of doing woodworking, I was doing automotive on the side. During that time, I had bought a 66 MGB convertible out of a wrecking yard. And I remember towing it home from Santa Clara and coming down what they call Graveyard Hill in Santa Clara. And the one brake caliper is off, so I'd stuck a piece of wood in the caliper so it wouldn't spit the piston. And the back brakes were smoking, and I remember my wife was towing me, and we had a 68 El Camino at the time, and towing, and we got home, and she was in tears. She was so mad. She didn't want me to buy that, and I did anyway. And I put it back together and run it for several years. I remember being on a dirt road. I had come back from Cedar City, and I wanted to I pulled off at the Browse exit and went off the south side and down into Ash Creek. There's a dugway, goes down into Ash Creek. Well, I had never been down there, so I wanted to drive down. So I drive to the bottom of this in a 66 MG convertible. And I remember looking at from the bottom up going, I hope I can get out of here. Because I could feel the bottom scraping on rocks and things as I got down in there. And fortunately, I had a limited slip differential, and I very carefully picked my way back up that dugway and got out and got it home. And I thought, if I'm going to keep going off-road, I really need to find something different than this convertible. So I started looking. I found an old military Jeep. Guy had it in his backyard.
Flat fender?
Flat fender, 1942. It was military. Still had the machine gun mount in the frame. I think his name was Ralph Schwartzer. He was an Arizona Highway Patrol officer, lived in there by St. George. And I remember at the time he wanted $650 for this Jeep, which I look back now and it was way too much. And I had $600. He was kind of holding firm to it. And his wife took me aside when he wasn't listening, and she said, if you'll buy this Jeep, I'll pay the extra $50. She wanted it out of her backyard because there was an extra body laying on its side, and they had the thing built. It was a doghouse. They had it all around. It was part of a doghouse. Like a dummy, I ended up buying it, started piecing it together, and got it up and running, had the flathead 4-cylinder in it, had the old T84 transmission, and got it all up and running, and got it licensed and go out with the family in it. And we come down off of up above the that industrial park over by Hurricane where Walmart distribution is now.
Yep.
You can drive up that ridge above and look down into Quail Lake. There's a road goes up the top of that, and we had gone up and stopped and watched or looked and on our way back down, and that old T84 was notorious for jumping out of gear. And it did, and when they jump out of gear, a lot of times it'll chip a tooth off of first gear. And so it's like clunkety, 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 clunk. So that's what happened with that, and I hunted around. I couldn't find another T84, and I did hunt up, found a T14 that a guy had. It was bolted to a Buick V6. So I ended up doing some work for the guy that had that, did some trade work, and got the motor and transmission and everything from him.
Was that one of the old Oddfires?
It was an old Oddfire.
That was great numbers.
It was the 231. It wasn't a 225 Dauntless, but
Okay.
it was an Oddfire 231. And so I traded for it, and part of the trade is MacArthur Welding that was next door to where I had my shop needed a motor for their welder, so it was kind of a three-way trade. And my motor was still good, and so I took the motor out of the Jeep I had and put it in one of their Hobart welders because it bolted in place of that Continental motor. A few modifications, and bolted that in so they could continue using that welder. Then the other guy that had the other shop, we got the trade all done, and I got that V6 put in that Jeep and with the 14, and it made a pretty good little Jeep out of it that we run it for a long time until we killed it deer hunting.
That's not the one that's on the that was on the old
On
sign?
the sign? No.
Okay.
No. Actually, the one, my original Jeep is actually still on the road. My
Wow.
second son, Tyson, has got it in Richfield.
Oh, nice.
We'd been hunting deer out to what they call General Steam. I don't know if you've ever been out that way.
I don't know that name.
General Steam was started back in the 30s, I believe. Kind of an eccentric old guy that had bought a bunch of equipment and different things from Hoover Dam when they had built down there, and when they got done, and there's a lot of equipment and old stuff around that they were getting rid of, and he bought a bunch of that old lathes and mills and and he had hauled steam boilers and big hammer deals and a bunch of stuff up in the mountains that is it was northwest of Gunlock and Vail, Utah.
Okay.
Kind of up in the mountains. And the guy's original intent is there was an old iron mine up there. He was going to mine his own iron and process it. He was going to build cars. Yeah. And
That is kind of the hard way about doing that.
Some big buildings up there at one time, some pretty good sized buildings, and there was a lot of old Studebakers and stuff he had hauled in there. There's still a few iron remnants and stuff up there. The old buildings have since been burned down and kind of tore up, and the old cars have been hauled away. But up in General Steam, you could actually go to the top of the mountain and then down off the south side. And we had gone out there deer hunting and got into some really heavy brush and off camber sliding down. So we knew it wasn't to go back up. It was go clear out the bottom. And at the bottom there was a large wash. And we were trying to get up out the other side. And back in the day it was open differentials. And still had the 1/4 ton full float rear end in it. Well, we ended up breaking an axle, breaking a second axle, blowing up the motor.
Oh, jeez.
Several things that my wife informed me that she says, next time you do something like that, you just shoot it between the headlights and leave it. But we went back in and winched it up out of there with hand winches and actually had to cut down 1 or 2 trees to get it out.
Uh-oh.
It was back in the day that was a big no-no, but we got it out, hauled it home, and ended up rebuilding it. We put CJ7 axles under it from a Quadratec 7 that had the offset rear end in it. Had
Okay.
that Quadratec full-time 4-wheel drive. but the offset was great for the Dana 18 transfer case.
Yep.
And so we put that in, and then I bought a motor out of I want to say it was an 89 S10, little 4.3. I knew a guy in Kanab that had bought the truck for body parts and stuff. It had been broadsided, and he bought it for a little S10 Cyclone he was putting back together. And so he had the motor and everything. I bought the motor and the harness and the computer and all that, and put that fuel-injected V6 in that little Jeep. Nice. Behind a Muncie 465. The only problem with those is you have no driveline length. With nobody made an adapter short enough to make it work, and so we made an adapter.
Oh, nice.
And Novak Industries makes an adapter for the 435 to the 18 and 20. I gave them that design.
Nice. That's
the
awesome.
original prototype is still in that Jeep, still running to this day, and its overall length from bell housing to the transfer case is 1 inch longer than stock. Mm-hmm. With a 465 in it.
So they gave you a little bit of driveline.
And give me some driveline length. And but I run that Jeep for probably 100,000 miles after we did that build on it.
Does it still have the 4.3 in it now?
Still got the same 4.3 in it. We've changed the body. We wore the body clear out on it. And so my son put another body, and we helped him. And so he's still running that little Jeep today.
That's awesome. So when did Dixie take life?
Dixie took life. We run the furniture business for about 14 years, doing automotive on the side. We sat down one day and put a pencil to it, and we were doing better on the side work than we were full-time in the woodwork. And went, well, this is kind of stupid. And then we had our insurance company, because I was doing some automotive work at the same shop as the furniture shop. They said, we won't insure you with a woodworking shop and automotive in the same location. We just won't do it. We'd never had a claim, never had a problem, but they absolutely refused. And after we looked at numbers and stuff and thought, you know what, it's probably time to let the furniture go. And so we phased it out and went into listed as Thompson Repair. We worked for a couple of years as Thompson Repair, did general automotive, but our business license listed everything up to horse trading. I mean, it was... The city at one point tried to make us buy 2 business licenses, and it's like
for one location.
I'm one guy working in one location, yeah, but you're doing different things. And I said, well, Gibson's down the road, so sporting good and groceries and diapers, and how many business licenses do they have? Well, that's different. He says, no, it's not. They have a lot more employees, but they're doing all that under one roof. I said, what difference is it? Anyway, we finally got sorted out, and the city went away and left me alone finally, after a few threats that I'd made. But eventually I had built this little Jeep that we'd been running for some time, and I'd experiment and say, if I do this would work better. And so we'd do a shackle reversal on it, and it steered better. And then, of course, the 9-inch drums were horrible. And when I went to the other axles on it, I had disc brakes up front, so I built discs to go on the back, and we eventually put 12-inch discs all the way around, so it stopped really good. But I started having people come in, well, can you do that to my Jeep? Well, yeah, I think so. And I was getting more and more of that, and I got to the point where I was getting actually quite a bit of four-wheel drive work. And we got to kicking it around one day, and he said, probably ought to change the name to Dixie Four-Wheel Drive. Because back in the 70s, the building that we were working out of, the location we're at in St. George now, was a building that when my parents passed away, my dad passed away last, but my 2 brothers and myself inherited that piece of property, and my sisters inherited the house and the other land and the insurance policy and stuff. But so I eventually ended up buying the 2 brothers out of the property there because they didn't have any real interest in it, and so I bought them out of it. But in years before, when my dad was alive, we rented that building out. Originally, that building that sat on that location, we manufactured roof tile, the Bar Tile brand roof tile. It was a cement shingle tile. And as a little kid, I worked with Dad up there. My job was to shovel sand in the hopper and get it ready for the next batch of cement. And I was probably more grief than good some days for him, but it was fun to work with him and watch him. I have fond memories of seeing him making that tile and up in the building there. So after they closed that, he sold that business years later to one of my uncles in Cedar who had a block plant, and they had it for a little while, and then I don't know, whatever, kind of went defunct. So after that, Dad just used that as a rental property. Rented it to Wetzel and Hawthorne. They made sleeping bags and tents and stuff, a satellite building for them. And then later he just rented different outfits. He rented it out to a guy that was running a garage out of it, old Harold and Larry Musgrave, that rented it for probably 13 years from us. And I got to know them quite well. And at one point, Larry had moved up from California originally, and he told me one day he wanted me to change. He asked me if I could change the writing on the roof. He used to say Thompson bar tile on the roof, spelled out in the white tile on the red roof. And so he was thinking that he was going to do Jeeps eventually, and had me write Dixie four-wheel drive on the roof. Well, he never did do Jeeps, and eventually got out of the automotive business.
But you still own the building. And
we still own the building, and it said Dixie four-wheel drive on the roof. And I thought, well, be ashamed to waste that sign. And so we changed the name to Dixie four-wheel drive from Thompson Repair. And I think that was somewhere about, let's see, in the early 90s, somewhere in there. So we changed over and copyrighted the name and made sure we had everything taken care of. That's when we changed the name over to Dixie
Did
four-wheel
they make
drive.
you get a new business license?
Well,
or just change the name?
We changed the name on the business license.
Perfect.
when it come due again. So we've been Dixie four-wheel drive ever since then. I had customers from years previous that, little old ladies that drove Buicks and stuff that would come in. So does it mean you're not going to work on my car anymore? And it's like, no, I'll still work on your car. I had customers, sweet little old ladies. I just couldn't tell them no. I'd steal my old customers. In fact, we had a call 2 days ago, somebody still asking about if we would take a side job on doing some woodwork. And it's like,
wow,
not a chance.
No.
you can't afford me. But so I continued to take care of my old clientele that I'd had for years and years, because I'd got to know them. They were friends. They were good people. And so we've always tried to take care. We mainline now in four-wheel drive, not exclusively, the occasional car or something that's broke down that's got to have something. I get it more so here in Moab than over in St. George, but because there's not as many places to refer them to. But I told my guys some years back, I said, okay, rule is now no more European stuff if it can be avoided. I don't want any more Rolls Royce, no more Bentleys, Lotus, Lamborghinis. I used to work on a lot of those. And it's like, yeah, the answer is no. Don't want to do any more. Had a customer in here the other day with a Lamborghini. Beautiful car. But it wasn't for work. He was he'd dropped a customer's Jeep off for him.
Okay.
And it brought his car by so we could look at it. Beautiful car.
An older Lamborghini or a new one?
It's a new one.
Oh, geez.
Nice car.
Some cash.
Yeah.
Those are not cheap cars.
Beautiful car. But fortunately, I don't have to work on those anymore.
Yeah, that's nice. Although, your shop rate would go up.
Yes, it would definitely go up if I was going to do those. I'd have to get different hoists. Mine don't go close enough to the ground to get on.
Oh, true.
With a Lambo. So
you something that you discussed earlier, you said your wife was from, now I've forgotten the name.
Riverton.
Riverton. And you were down here. How did the two of you meet?
Interesting story about that. I tease her about being a mail-order bride.
Mail-order bride, there we go.
Why, I was in Florida serving mission. It was for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My first missionary companion down there was a kid by the name of Randy Wall from Riverton, Utah. Fun guy. Got to love him. He was great. And so we were together for about 6 months as companions in the mission field. he had a girlfriend at home in Riverton that was waiting for him when he come home off his mission. And he wrote to her one day and says, "Hey, my companion doesn't have anybody writing to him. You need to find somebody to write him." So anyway, it's like, oh, really, Randy Elder? Anyway, so it wasn't for too long. There's 3 young women from up in the Riverton area that started writing me letters. And I'd been out for, a few months. When we serve a mission, it was for 2 years. So anyway, I started getting letters, and I'd respond to them. And to be honest with you, 2 of them were really flaky, or seemed really flaky. So anyway, they kind of puttered away. But my wife that was writing to me, who I'd never met, continued to write. And for some reason, I kept writing. And so we wrote back and forth letters, each week for 18 months, and got to know her very well through letters. And I thought, I think I'm going to marry this girl. And so when I come home off my mission...
Sight unseen, or did you get some photos?
She had sent me a couple pictures.
Okay.
So when I come home off my mission in January of 78, she had come down to meet me, but when you come off of a mission, you have to be released from your mission. And until then, you're still a missionary. I hadn't been released at the time, and she had stopped at my parents' house, and we'd driven past the house on the way to get released. And she yelled, "Are you released yet?" And I said, "No, we're on our way." She said, "Damn you." My wife grew up on a farming area, and that's a habit she's never broke. She tends to cuss, but it's part of what I love about her. I got released, and we dated. We got married 3 months after I come home from my mission.
Wow.
And so I tease her about being a mail order bride.
That's awesome.
And but that's how we met.
And how many kids do you have?
We've got 6.
6 kids.
She thought 3 would be a good number, and somehow we doubled that. We've got 3 boys and 3 girls.
So you thought 3 would be a good number. She thought 3 would be a good number.
Apparently,
and 6 ended up being the number.
It ended up 6, so we kind of had our own basketball team. But and they range from, like say, my oldest daughter, and then I've got a son, and then another daughter, and another daughter, and a son and a son. And my oldest, or not oldest daughter, my second daughter is about 6'2", and my youngest daughter is about 5'2", or right about that.
Really?
My mother-in-law is 4'11".
But your wife is not.
No, she's 5'7", about that, or well, she was before we started. Gravity started to settle us.
Yeah, you get to a certain age, and things just start to happen.
Start to recess.
You get shorter, and then, like I always say, you never lose your hair or become bald. It just migrates.
Yeah, it goes to different places.
Yeah. And it turns gray. Although you don't have much gray hair.
Oh, I keep working on it. I have hopes. My grandfather, on my mother's side, supposedly that's where you get your hair genes from, was 96 years old when he passed away and still had the majority of his hair. It was gray by then, but he still had most of it.
Well, I got really lucky that way because all the men on my mom's side were bald. Luckily, I took after my dad's side and got to keep my hair. It just came in gray early. Mm-hmm. By my mid-30s, I was turning gray in areas. But now it's just all gray. But, okay, so you guys have, I remember the shop being small when I first met you in the 90s. It was probably 96, 97. Mm-hmm. Now you've got 2 very, very nice buildings. And you come into your shops and you can tell that you guys do high quality work.
Well, we strive for that. I can't say it's always been exactly what it should be. When you start hiring employees, occasionally you'll run into things and to be honest with you, we've sorted through some employees. The staff we have in St. George right now is a pretty solid crew. I'm really pleased with them. We've got some. They have different ones have strong suits in different areas that are really good because certain things like welding. We've got a couple of that are really good welders, and some of them that are really good in wiring, different things. So, and most of them are quite versed, pretty much overall, and which is really nice. It's not always easy to find. And like I say, we've had to sort through some over the years as we've gone, but we've got a pretty solid staff over there. Some days I'm a little jealous. I've got 5 or 6 techs in St. George, 2 full-time sales guys, general manager, my youngest son who's a partner in the business as well, that's in sales. He can turn wrenches, he can weld. His strong suits in customer relations, sales, and stuff. He does very well there. When they get loaded up over there, there's pretty good staff. Or if you have to push something or do something, you got a good group to work with. Over here, it's we're a little limited. It's my wife and I right now, and like I say, hopefully we'll eventually find somebody that will fit in and can do what we need. But
well, good luck with that. And if there's anything I can do when you start looking for, when you're really serious about starting to look and stuff, let me know, and I'll put the word out too. I got a pretty good network.
Yeah.
That, we find people for businesses all the time.
And like I say, we're hoping that this COVID thing will subside, that they'll get a handle on what direction we're going and a few things.
November 4th.
I keep hearing that.
It'll instantly be gone.
Yeah, magically poof, and now it's just the flu again. I guess shouldn't make light of it because some people have been seriously ill from it and things, but then again, some of the doctors I've talked to, and they say it's a 99% survivable, and some of the people that are dying from it, a common cold will kill them.
Correct.
So, I'm not a medical expert by any means, so I'm not going to make any statements on it.
I just know a lot of people that have lost their businesses. Especially in the service industries, restaurants.
It's been really tough for them.
Breweries, people, a lot of my friends in Northern California in that Placerville area have really suffered with their businesses and lost their businesses, and it's it's just one of those things. But I hope that everybody gets through it healthy and gets through it. And we're making light of it, but it is serious. We'll see how it goes, but I have a feeling that next year it'll just, there'll be something new, of course.
Yeah.
Let's just hope it's not as bad.
I'm hoping it gets back to where the people are without work and can get back to work and can, get lives back to somewhat normal and
I agree.
And taking care of themselves and their families.
So what's the future you think for Dixie 4-wheel drive?
Well, I've had a lot of people say, man, I wish you'd come open a store in such and such. And it's like, I didn't really plan on expanding from St. George. It just kind of happened when Steve closed Moab Outpost here in Moab, sold his property, closed up here. Kevin that actually owned this building that we bought,
right,
and that he'd called, and he knew our partner Albert Watt in Idaho, and I said, hey, if you guys ever thought of coming to Moab, now would be the time, because Steve's closing his business, and we talked about it and thought, well, do we want to, do we not want to, do we, and so we met as a board and sat down and discussed it and decided, we probably ought to give it a shot. Moab's a great area. And so we ended up deciding, we're going to pull the trigger on it. And so it's been about 3.5 years now. Now, my wife and I, when we decided that, this is a good idea, along with the rest of the board, didn't realize that she and I had spent the first year over here getting the building set up and getting things going. And so we're back now. That's likelihood's going to be another year we're over here before things, get back to normal and that. But it's been good. It's a beautiful area and met a lot of great people over here. We hope that if the world gets somewhat back to normal and the nation gets back somewhat on track, we hope, and then hopefully get employees that we can staff with, because the exposure has been great here. We've got a lot of customers from all over, up and down the East Coast and through the middle of the country that we've met, and we're getting a lot of repeats in the 3 years we've been here. I've got a lot of customers that we've seen for the second and third time in the time we've been here.
That's excellent.
And so it's been great. We've met a lot of really good people.
Glad to hear that. The idea is to expand the business here, not necessarily open one in Salt Lake City or.
No, that's not really. I mean, that's
it's
not
hard enough to run.
That's not
places.
something we've really looked at and projected toward. I never had the thought of expanding beyond where we were at in St. George, to be honest with you. When the old building got to the point we were looking at remodeling the old building, and it was kind of getting to be a race as to whether we remodeled it and got it back in shape, or it fell down on us. The building was about 70 years old, and like I say, I grew up working with my dad there. My grandfather and my dad built that building back in 1948-49, and built it for the express interest of making roof tile there.
Right.
And so it was never designed as a garage. I don't know if you remember where I had my hoist there. I'd cut the ceiling out, and
Yep.
we'd raise the ceiling.
That's right.
So to get up, to raise them high enough, so we'd had modify the building all over and it wasn't the best working conditions. It wasn't insulated, so in the summer you couldn't keep it cool, or keep it cooled off, and in the winter you'd freeze your hiney off because you couldn't keep it warm. And so when it finally come down to the point, we looked at the first extensive remodel. I had an architect look at a couple of things, and it's going to be like $675,000 to remodel it, do the renovation. I'm going, I'm not looking to build a dealership here. I just want to fix the garage. And so then we end up tearing the whole thing down and going way beyond what we had initially planned on. So we're just over 13,000 square feet in the other facility. But to be honest with you, I don't regret it for a minute.
It's a gorgeous building, the way the layout is, and the showroom and the shop space and the parking and everything else you got out there. I was really impressed when I showed up there a couple of years ago, just as you guys were. It was just finishing. There was part of it that you guys were still working on.
Yeah.
But it was just absolutely gorgeous.
Well,
I mean, it really makes a good impression, as does this store, and I think that's very helpful in our business, in the off-road industry. The businesses that I see that flourish are the ones that are very well organized, very clean. The guys that struggle are the guys in those 1 and 2 bay shops that, they got all their parts, laying on the floor, and just no organization, and they're always looking for things, and so they're spending a lot more time. Customers walk in and go, "Oh wow, you're going to work on my transmission in this place, or whatever." Having a facility that looks, almost like an operating room, really does enhance the overall business, I believe.
Yeah. Well, we've tried really hard to keep it nice. My wife is a clean fanatic. I don't know if you noticed, out front and out back, there's no weeds in the area. She goes out every day. She's a weed killer. It's great because I hate pulling weeds. But she's done
that old farming community.
She's done a great job of that. But I can't fault the little crowded shops, because I was one. I
Nope, understand.
spent, my backyard was my parts department. I had more junk and crap out there. My wife always called it my junkyard. I called it inventory, or my treasure room.
Yep.
And I nearly cried when we cleared all that out to do the new building. And I caught a lot of flack because we took 2 trailer loads of axles to the salvage yard. And I got so many people screaming at me over social media, different stuff, going, "How come you did?" It's like, dude, I've had that stuff in the backyard for 3 or 4 years. You guys never bought any of it. And I can't house it anymore.
Exactly.
And so making the change has been because of my nature. kind of a collector anyway.
We call that
And
hoarding.
my parents grew up through the Depression,
Yes.
so they didn't get rid of much. And I've had to overcome a lot of that. But with my wife's help and the kids, they've kept me going pretty good. But every now and again, I just go, oh man, I had one of those, and
Now you have to source it outside
I've had to
somewhere.
get over that. But to be honest with you, I'm glad we've progressed to this point, because now it is so much nicer being able to come to work and get on the computer and find my inventory and do everything else. There are still some little things I save and hide aside, and that we use a lot of.
I like that, hide aside.
And I do have to hide some of this stuff occasionally. But every now and again, my kids will come, Dad, do you know anywhere there's I happen to have one of those. So I still rat hole a few things. But,
That's awesome.
But yeah, it's been, and we've tried over the years to build a brand, and as we hire people, we explain to them, we expect a certain level of work and a certain amount of pride and stuff. And if you're wearing a company shirt when you go out in public, remember to behave yourself
Yeah, because
and
you're
act
representing
accordingly.
the company.
And we've got a good group that I've been really proud of them. They're all good friends, and my wife treats them like they're all her kids.
That's awesome. That is how you keep people, especially the people you want. That's important. We did the same thing with our racers and rock crawlers.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, somebody comes into the group. You wish they'd have found something else to do. Very few and far between. They just rub people the wrong way or whatever, and they always find their way out of the scene because they're just not welcomed.
Yeah.
And employees are the same way. Before moving to Cedar City in the mid 90s, I used to run Sears Automotives.
Mm-hmm.
And I started off doing tires and batteries and shocks and exhaust, and then went on, through that, and then ended up as a store manager and ran stores that had 128 employees. Well, there was always, every store I went into, there was stores I was like, why did somebody hire you? And then my job was kind of not to force them out, but make them see the light that they really didn't fit. It's difficult without just going, you're fired, get out of here. Of course, I've done that too.
Yeah.
And it's difficult.
I was going to say, some of them will bring it to that point.
Yes.
And some of them, you can tell, some of them, I had a guy that worked for me years ago. And he come in, he says, I love this. I love this. I love this. And I said, Ron, you're a sick man. You'll get over it. And he did. He eventually went out from there and went into more of a parts type guy, selling parts instead of actually having to work on, get dirty and stuff, because it turned out it wasn't really in his nature. It was fun, as a hobby a little bit, but to do it every day, he quickly got over that. But he realized it, we realized it, and we're still friends.
That's awesome.
We had a marketing guy that worked for us, and he was great. Loved him, known him for over 20 years. And he didn't leave because it wasn't a good fit or doing his job. He left because he did too good a job, and a big company kept watching his work and come and tried to hire him. We had given him a raise, and then they come and tried to hire him again, but they made him sign a non-disclosure that he wouldn't tell us what they were paying him. But I
think I know who that was.
He was feeling bad, and I says, look, you know what? If this is good for you and it's good for your family, take it. That's the important part. If it's a good move for you, take that job, and we'll be fine. We'll get somebody else, and we've got a guy that's part-time now doing a great job for us, and, we're still friends. Those are kind of things that just happen. And then, like, say, you get some employees that, like, oh, they really need to go away, and I don't know how this is going to happen without really...
It's amazing. People can interview really well, and then you hire them, and within 48 hours of working, okay, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
This guy totally, pulled the wool over my
resume
eyes.
was a little padded.
Yeah, padded or just the
Yeah.
personality.
Uh-huh.
All of a sudden, true colors come out.
One of the great things I've had, my daughter that's our general manager, Tara,
Yeah.
she is really good.
She's kind of like your wife, no nonsense.
Yeah, she's had to fire some of them, and she'll walk in and take care of it. I mean, she'll make a clean cut if need be. But she had worked for Harmon's in their business department and up in the new City Creek Center and then down here in St. George and a couple places. And she learned a lot about corporate law and business. And she interviews, and everybody that we hire, she requires them to take a personality test.
Oh, nice.
And there are certain personalities that she will no longer hire. If they come up as a certain personality, ain't happening. Because she's tracked it, and she knows which personalities work with the others and which ones that we've had. Because I won't tell you which one, but all of our employees that we've had most issues with have all been one personality. And so she's done a really good job of tracking through all that.
That's great. I'll bet there's people that would love, business owners that would love to have her program.
She would tell them what it is if they talk to her.
Huh, okay. And, well, everybody's heard that. Call Tara.
She may shoot me, but yeah, but like I say, it's she's found it to be very, very successful. Works very well. At least has done for us.
That's great. So is there anything in your history? Well, let's talk some more about off-road. You and I met through the clubs as Color Country. We helped bring in ARCA and Ranch Pratt to Cedar City. They put a call out for judges, being that the club was working with Ranch to try to facilitate and help him do what he needed to get done, and including BLM and all that kind of stuff. It was before Three Peaks became a county park. I put the call out to the Rebels, and wasn't it yours, Dixie Off-Road? Wasn't that the other club that was down there? What was the name?
Well, it was Rebels 4-wheel drive.
Oh, it was Rebels.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was a trip director for the Rebels Club.
And so I put the call out to you guys, and there was like 20, 30 of you guys all showed up and to help out with that event. And a lot of you guys stayed for years.
Yeah,
there was,
I think there was 14 of us that traveled the circuit for most of 5 years.
Yeah. And when I started Cal Rocks, when I moved out of Cedar City in 2000 and then did my first event in 2001, I was like, oh man, I wish I had you guys. But too far away. How did you like that part of it, the competition scene? And
I really enjoyed it. I remember the first event up in Cedar. I think it was Phil Collard, wasn't he, the course director?
Yep.
And he was a lot of fun. And I remember going up there and walking the course with him the first day and everything. And that was up there when we walked the course the first time was the day I broke my ankle.
Oh, was it?
And I didn't know I'd broke it. I was wearing cowboy boots when we walked the course, and I jumped over a spot, and I heard my ankle pop and thought, I've promised these guys the next 2 days. And so we worked the course.
I'd forgotten all about that, and
so I thought I just sprained it, because after a month or two, I finally got back to where it was feeling all right. It was just a few years back that I actually had it x-rayed and found out I'd broke it in 3 places.
Oh, wow. And
but
it just refused itself?
It's fused, and it is what it is. It'll never be right.
You're not going to go out and play basketball, right?
No, I don't run anymore. I can still hike, and I can still Jeep.
That's awesome. And hiking is only when the Jeep breaks down?
Yeah, well, I do enjoy hiking, and I did a lot of it when we were laying out trails before. Right. And so I like to hike them before and get a good look at them and start driving them. But yeah, the early days of ARCA, I loved it. They were so much fun because we'd have people come and compete that were in their daily drivers. The Jeep they were driving to work every day. I still remember one guy in an XJ broke down in my obstacle, He's on his phone. He is timed out. I'm going, you got to move. We got to get you off of here. He's on his phone with his wife trying to find parts for her Cherokee that she doesn't know he's got and competing in. I'm pretty sure he caught what for when he got home. But those days were great because, I mean, they were driving almost stock outfits and competing.
Especially that first year.
And yeah, it was fun. It was really cool to watch, and then to watch the progression of the sport and the equipment was really fun.
Over those 5 years, it was incredible.
The growth on it was phenomenal, and the ingenious ideas they started coming up with. I'm trying to think if it was Neil Lillard or who it was toward the end was working on a extendable wheelbase.
Sounds like something Neil would do.
We had talked about that, and I said, in some of these places, long wheelbase is a detriment. In other places, it's a huge bonus. And there's nothing in the rule book that says you can't do it. And I remember Tiny in his moon buggy broke down in one of my obstacles. It wouldn't run, it wouldn't start up. And then they timed out. And we had to get him off the course. And he says, well, it won't run. I says, grab your spotter, have him pour his water bottle over that fuel pump. It'll start up. Poured it over the fuel pump, fired right up. He says, why didn't you tell me that before? I said, you were on the clock.
Exactly.
I said, I can't be helping you on the clock. I said, but I can help you get off the course. And I says, I can tell you, if you put that pump in a submersible fuel cell so it's cooled, you won't have that problem. Different things, but, I wouldn't help him on the clock because, it wouldn't be fair. But
That's
I'd
awesome.
sure share with him after the fact. But yeah, we met some great people that we still see. Shannon Campbell was always such a show. And whenever he's up in Moab, he's always stopped by and always gives my wife a hug. And he's great. Chris Durham from out in the Carolinas.
Oh, yeah.
We see him periodically.
That was one of the things
Bunches of them,
with this year with COVID and losing the Red Rock 4-wheel drive Easter Jeep Safari.
Yeah, it's
that's when I get to see all those guys.
Yeah, it was kind
In
of
fact,
a
Danny
brutal
Graham
thing.
said to say hello because that's where we're staying right now.
Yeah,
We
I
will
see
see.
Danny pretty regular. He
Yes.
does come down. He gets bored. He could show up and go, I'm bored out of my mind. I got to talk to somebody.
Exactly.
So he'll come in and he'll hang out, sit, a bay away or something, and we'll visit while I'm working or something, and so we visit and have a chance to talk. But
yeah, because he was back there in the day. He was like crew chief for Chris Durham, and that's how I met him. Was at our first event when Chris showed up. And a couple of those guys with old Dave Knight, who there's a whole lot of people who'd like to see Dave Knight again, but
yeah,
for a different reason. Dave, if you ever hear this, do not show up around a rock crawl or anybody that used to rock crawl, because they all got their name on a piece of lead probably, or the end of a hammer.
yeah, it wouldn't end well.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't.
But yeah, the early days of the ARCA were a lot of fun. Remember Chris winning that first year,
Yes.
and with a junkyard built buggy and a carburetor mounted backwards.
I remember at Donner Ski Ranch, and this was probably 2003, 2004. We were still running under Cal Rocks, and he and I were sitting there talking in the restaurant / bar at the ski resort, and he goes, Rich, I don't know if I'll ever win again. I think the sport's gone past me. And I said, Chris, don't worry about it. You will win again. And he won that event.
Uh-huh.
And he came back. On the second day, he came back from being way down and won. And he looked at me and he goes, "How did you know?" I said, "Because you're Chris Durham. It's just the way it is. You're Chris Durham. That's what happens." So yeah, he was one of my favorite drivers. Still is a great guy and shows up here every year. It stays at Danny's, so I get to see him there. And Shannon, I don't know if you heard, but Shannon's youngest child, Bailey, is just announced that she's pregnant.
Oh, I hadn't heard that yet.
Yeah, she married Brian Crofts, and they they're expecting now.
Well,
So
cool.
that's awesome.
Great.
That's going to cut into her racing.
Yeah, I was going to say that might slow her down for a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be at least a season, I would think. That that she's going to. This way, Brian now has a chance to beat her. But I still think Bailey will be the first female winner of KOH, King of the Hammers.
That'll be cool.
I thought she was going to do it this year. She was leading, and then the water pump pulley went out on her, or the idler pulley or something.
Yeah.
And Shannon found out, was in the pits, brought out a part for her, and they got back running, and she was able to finish, I believe. But yeah, it was. We were all rooting for everybody that was online, and we were driving across the country, I think, or on our way to Arizona from the event, and cheering her on. But yeah, it's great to see the second generation starting to come through.
Yeah.
You know, Bryce, running the company, him and your daughter, and then my son is now running Trail Hero, which is turning into a pretty big event out there.
Yeah.
And so it's really kind of cool to watch the second generation come through. I interviewed George Schultz from Red Rock Wheelers because his dad was the one that started that here and took it over from the Chamber of Commerce or the city that was running Easter Jeep. So, it's kind of cool to see that this sport has longevity with the second and third generations.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
It appeals to so many, and we're starting to see a lot more women getting involved in driving and really enjoying it.
Yes.
And
that's one of the things that we do is we help out with the Rebel Rally, which is the all women's navigational challenge. Goes from Tahoe through Nevada and California, all map and compass, and finishes up in almost on the border. And it's an 8-day affair for the girls, and we're out there for about 12. But it's an awesome event to watch these women that some of them have no experience off-road at all, but they're gung-ho to go out and do this. And luckily, they're not doing any rock crawling or anything like that. They're basically on roads and some washes. Just watching them overcome a lot of fears, overcoming the things that happen to them because they don't have their support group. Their boyfriends or husbands or whatever aren't with them.
yeah.
And all of a sudden, they flatten 2 tires. Well, they got 2 spares. Oh, we just learned last week how to change a tire, and they get them changed, and they're thrilled.
Yeah.
It's just fun to be around, and it's great to see the women get really involved with the sport. Well, great. I would like to thank you for coming on board and with Conversations with Big Rich and
you're welcome.
Sharing your history with our listeners. Thank you for being a friend for so many years. I know there was a long time there where we didn't see each other.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I never got to St. George very often.
Yeah.
And then we were able to come by. I guess it was about 5 years ago. It was the first year of Trail Hero that I had put some tires on that were too big, and I needed my bumpers and rock sliders
trimmed up a little bit.
And you got the Sawzall out and opened them up, and those tires fit great. Now I still run those bigger tires.
Oh, good.
And haven't done anything else. I never. It's awesome. So I really appreciate the years of friendship and everything that you've done. You're one of those unsung heroes in off-road, I believe. The drivers and big company owners are these guys that everybody gets to see all the time on social media and on video and everything. And it's guys like you that were around at the very beginning of the sport competitive scene and opening trails in areas that people now enjoy as a recreational area when it wasn't a recreational area. You're one of those kind of people that I'm trying to reach with the history, so that the people coming into the sport now actually understand how it got to where it's at. And I want to thank you for your friendship over the years for doing that. So
You're welcome.
thank you very much.
Enjoyed it.
All right, Milt. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If you enjoy these podcasts, please give us a rating. Share some feedback with us via Facebook or Instagram, and share our link among your friends who might be like-minded. Well, that brings this episode to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week with Conversations with Big Rich. Thank you very much.